Joining us now via Skype is Andrew Yang, the former Democratic presidential candidate who's been in the news a lot lately. Andrew Yang, welcome back to The Issue Is.
It's great to be here. I wish the circumstances were better, but it's good to see you, Alex. You're looking good.
Thank you very much. You're looking good, too. We like your quarantine hair. Thanks for noticing. Let's talk for a moment, though, about that big issue of unemployment. So many folks out of work right now. You're president. You're in charge of the government. How do we fix this?
The first thing we need to do is put money into people's hands so we can weather this crisis. And the stimulus checks that already went out, they didn't reach many Americans. They're not enough. They essentially helped pay last month's bills, and this month's bills and next month's bills are right around the corner. So we have to put $2,000 a month into everyone's hands for the duration of the crisis. And there are dozens of members of Congress who have now come forward and said this is the step we should take, because that money doesn't disappear, Alex. It goes right back into our local economies, into groceries, rent, fuel, and things that help keep our communities, frankly, functioning. Because right now, 30 million unemployed actually understates the extent of the economic harm that our communities are experiencing.
Is there part of you that says, when it comes to universal basic income, I told you so? Because there are a lot of people that are now talking about this concept that were essentially laughing at you when you brought it up a few months ago.
Alex, what I said is that we should make this move because of the rate of change. And unfortunately, the crisis has accelerated the rate of change, where we're experiencing 10 years of automation and displacement in 10 weeks. So I'm thrilled that my campaign helped advance universal basic income right before this crisis, because we need it now more than ever.
You know, one of the criticisms, even before this, of universal basic income is that it's a disincentive for work. That people, if they're getting a check from the government, why would they keep working or going about other sorts of jobs? What do you say to that?
Millions of Americans just got that stimulus check, and I'm sure they felt the same thing we all feel, which is a sense of relief, more security in the future. They can breathe a little easier, but it doesn't make them lazy or not want to work. The fact is, we're inside because we know that's the right thing to do for our health and our community's health. So experience just shows how ridiculous it is that putting money into our hands somehow weakens our work ethic. It does not.
What do you say about the sort of broader societal questions about purpose that come from this? Because even after this crisis of the pandemic, there's still going to be a lot of people that are unemployed because of the economic aftershocks of all of this. And for folks that lose their job, how do you deal with that aspect of it, the loss of purpose?
I couldn't agree more. That is the central problem, and our economy will not snap back into place like a rubber band. Millions of these jobs that have been lost will not return. So we need to do everything we can to help give millions of Americans a path forward. That includes putting money into our hands, but that also includes job creation measures, big and small. We should be supercharging nonprofits, small businesses, state governments, schools, hospitals, anyone that needs a hand. We're short hundreds of thousands of trained healthcare workers to do contact tracing to help combat the pandemic. We need to be investing in job creation measures at every level, particularly starting at the federal level.
Do you see any realistic political path for universal basic income in the short term? Do you see Republicans getting behind that idea?
I do, because many Republicans are stepping forward saying putting cash into Americans' hands is a good idea. The stimulus checks that went out were nearly unanimous. The fact is, Republicans love businesses that help create jobs, and we can all see that right now we're all being sent home and we're losing jobs through no fault of any business owner or individual. So this is going to be bipartisan. Universal basic income, I believe, will be front and center, and I think it's going to pass this year.
Another issue that you're talking about this week, you put out a PSA about discrimination in the Asian American community. It's been seen by millions. Here's part of it.
We don't have the virus more than anyone else.
And all Americans are susceptible.
Every one of us, no matter who we are.
And we know it's disproportionately affecting African Americans, as well as all of our underserved communities.
So lose the bigotry, ignorance,
finger pointing, and assaults.
We're all in this together.
And we will rise out of this.
So what's your sort of bottom line point in this, and what's the reaction to this been like for you?
Well, the reaction's been tremendous because everyone knows that we're in this together, that there's no particular group that's somehow more responsible for this virus, particularly Asian Americans who are a world away from the origin and a world away from the Chinese government decisions that unfortunately help make this crisis worse. So I was thrilled to have the help of so many people who stepped forward and said, we need to say that we're all Americans, we're all in this together, and that racism is the last thing that we need right now in this time of crisis.
Do you think the Trump administration has perpetuated that?
I think it's actually the Republican strategy to try and frame the virus as a foreign effort, say this is the China virus, because it helps distract from their mishandling of the pandemic. And you don't need to take my word for it. That's actually in a memo that's being distributed. So we have to hold them accountable for the fact that, yes, this was a natural phenomenon that experts have been warning about for years, and trying to, frankly, throw Asian Americans under the bus just serves to separate us from each other rather than bring us together.
As one of the country's top Asian American leaders, what's your message to Asian Americans that feel persecuted against right now, that feel discriminated against and feel hurt?
It's a heartbreaking time for many Asian Americans. I know people who are afraid to leave their homes. What I would say is that we are just as American as anyone else. And if we have the capacity to help get our country through this crisis, we should act because everything we do in this time is going to be magnified.
All right, we want to pause for a moment and have a little bit of fun, too. You know, we like to play music on this show. And one of the things we learned about you from your YouTube channel, you're a piano player. Let's listen to some of that. I found this on your YouTube channel. Very nice, Andrew Yang.
Well, I'm in quarantine, and you have no choice but to try and keep yourself busy and stable.
Well, I found something else on YouTube. This is from an account called Hustle Simmons. He remixed your piano playing and some of your greatest hits, including one of your favorite songs, Return of the Mac. Take a look at this. Look at those hoop moves too, baby. It's only a matter of time. We need to play basketball together.
I would love that, man, because that would mean that this quarantine is over.
Exactly. All right, well, we're going to have more of Andrew Yang, including a conversation about his future. What's next for him? Stay with us. More of The Issue Is right after this. So I've never been to a political event quite like this before.
He's just as good looking in real life.
That's some of the fun we had with then presidential candidate Andrew Yang out on the campaign trail. He joins us now via Skype. I got to give a shout out to the Yang gang because they've been very good to me in Twitter, say, of all the groups. So thank you for your supporters being so kind.
You deserve it, man. You gave us like a spotlight when others would not. So thank you, Alex.
We appreciate that. And let's talk a moment about the campaign. Now that you're on the other side of it, your own campaign, what were some of the most important lessons that you learned about yourself from the experience and the most important lesson you learned about this country from the experience?
Well, what I learned about myself is that I am a very, very fortunate husband because my wife was a rock star throughout the entire campaign. I was away for the better part of 2 years. And I told people that I had two goals. One is to eradicate poverty, and number two is to stay married. And thanks to Evelyn, I knocked out number two. So thank you, Evelyn. Appreciate the heck out of you. On the country's side, I learned that Americans want the same thing that we all want. They just want a future that they can be excited about for themselves and their families, that we're still a very, very good, generous, open-minded country. And my campaign was the challenge and journey of my life, but I loved it. And I met so many tremendous people that I still miss, particularly people who came out for my campaign when I was this underdog and scrappy and, people were not giving me much of a shot. So thank you, Yang Gang, because thanks to you all, we helped advance solutions that our country needed right as this crisis hit.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of came out of nowhere for a lot of people. You have this huge online apparatus now. So where do you go from here? What's next for you?
Well, we're continuing to present our vision for the country. I just launched a podcast, Yang Speaks, this week. That was top 10 upon its launch. I'm working on getting money into people's hands through my organization, Humanity Forward. We've distributed 1.4 million and counting. I'm part of Project 100 that is putting 100 million into 100,000 different families' hands in the next 100 days, and we're more than halfway towards that fundraising goal. There's the All Americans campaign saying that we're all in this together and that Asian Americans are as American as anyone else. So I'm staying very busy, and it's in part because this is such a difficult time for our country. Anyone who has the capacity to lend a hand really should, and I feel like I'm in that group. I'm also in touch with the Joe Biden campaign, trying to help him defeat Donald Trump in the fall.
And just on that front, how should he campaign in this virtual world? This is something you were so sort of strong at, this idea of using technology. Maybe it's a little more foreign to him. What would your advice be on how to campaign right now?
Well, his team is very savvy. They're having me on their podcast, so that's a good start. I'll be up there this week. But I think that this is going to be a team effort. I think that Joe's campaign is going to rely upon surrogates to reach out to younger people and people who are native online. And we need to have all hands on deck to defeat Donald Trump in the fall. This is not going to be an easy race.
One other note on the presidential thing, you are suing New York, at least the election board, because they canceled the Democratic primary in that state. What's your bottom line point? Because their point is, look, we basically have a Democratic nominee. Why are we going to put people's safety in jeopardy, have people go to the polls right now?
Well, they're not canceling other elections, and there is vote by mail. So certainly we have the capacity to have this primary. And to me, we need to let people vote. Where you had some of my volunteers spend hundreds of hours gathering signatures to get us on the ballot. Other states who have been in this position have just let the primaries go. For New York to not delay, but to cancel its primary altogether is unheard of. Like, who's ever heard of that? Just be like, yeah, we're not going to do it this time. So there are ways to make sure that people can vote by mail remotely. Other states have done it. That's what New York should do instead of just saying, well, can't handle it. Because this is a terrible precedent. If you have states just saying, well, we shouldn't have elections because we can't figure out vote by mail, then what's that going to mean nationwide throughout this entire year?
And California doing a all vote by mail election in the next couple of weeks. One of the candidates in that is actually our guest in our next segment. So we'll talk more about that issue coming up. In terms of New York, though, there's a lot of rumors that you might run for mayor of New York. Is that something you're thinking about?
Well, we just want to try and solve problems. Certainly, there are enough problems, unfortunately, to go around. But it's very flattering to be thought of in that way. I am attracted more to executive roles because I think you can roll your sleeves up and get more done.
But if you were asked to be in the cabinet, would you think about that too?
That qualifies as an executive role. In my mind, usually are like running an agency in many cases.
And just to wrap things up on a fun note, quarantine life, that's different for everybody. What's quarantine life like for you, especially with two young kids? What are you watching? Anything you're binging these days?
I did watch Tiger King. I felt like, you have to do that to understand what the heck is going on in our pop culture. I just appreciate teachers every single day because I have two young boys, 7 and 4, and they are a handful. And hats off to the people that educate our kids every day, daycare workers, pretty much anyone who's making our kids stronger, because it's so much work. And it's another reason why I'm so grateful to have Evelyn as my wife and rock of the family, because she's doing it all right now. Not at all. I mean, I'm doing what I can to help. Don't get me wrong, but you know what I mean.
I'm sensing one of the strong ways that you do stay married is that you give lots of shout outs to your wife. So you got to appreciate that. A strong man who has a strong woman by his side driving the bus. Thank you very much, Andrew Yang. And we say goodbye with more music. This is you with a hologram of Tupac. And yes, this really happened.
But against the party. Like that up. Why you acting like
There we go. There it is. Andrew Yang showing off that deep shoulder action for the gangsta party happening here on the Issue Is. I love it. We're virtually having a dance party. Tupac. Pride of California. Andrew Yang, thank you. Congressional candidate Christy Smith with us next. Stay tuned.
Showing up, I keep my hand on my gun, cause they got me on the run.